Now we're going to be going over the bishop and knight versus king checkmate. Now this checkmate is definitely the hardest checkmate to ever force. So let's go in and see what we can do. So with the bishop and knight checkmate, it's pretty rare. It happens only like one in every 10,000 games or something like that. I personally have seen it once in my own chess career, I guess, and I was on the side that lost the game, so I guess it's important to know for that one time where you can beat your opponent. But without further ado, let's see what white should do here to force the victory. So in this position, we can see that white has a dark square bishop and a knight. So the dark square bishop can only go on dark squares. To help checkmate black, I propose that we put black's king on a dark square. So we want to force the king into a corner, but we also only want to force our king into this corner or this corner, because only in these two corners can we use the bishop to give checkmate. So our first step here is to get a king and activate it. So let's play something like king to e4, so we can get closer to the black's king and cut off these squares. The key is similar to the two bishop checkmate. We need to form some sort of wall, but this time, since our knight is less mobile than the bishop, we need to use our knight and the king and the bishop to help restrict black's king. So let's see what happens. If black plays king to d6, we have part of our wall already finished. We already have this section of our wall done, so we already have this diagonal, but we need to get this control of this diagonal. So we need to play the move knight to e5, controlling the c6 square. Notice how the king controls the d5 square, so essentially for this little section, we actually have another wall. Now if black plays the move king to c7, that's okay. He's trying to use this idea to get out. However, we can just continue using our king to push his king away. So we use our king d5 to near his king, and he might play something like king to b7. So if he plays king to b7, that's alright. We can use our king to force him into this side of the wall, so to the a6 side. So once again, we play king to d6 to push his king on this side. And if he plays king to a6, then now we have king to c6, which then drastically reduces the amount of squares he can go to. So if he doesn't want to do that, he has another option. However, let's see what happens if black plays something like king to c8. So king to c8, once again, he's just going to go between these two squares. He doesn't mind staying in this light square corner because he knows that we can't checkmate him over here. So we've got to somehow force his king out. Well, let's play the move king to c6 then. King to c6, the idea is that eventually we're going to put our king on this side and outflank black's king so that he ends up moving towards the corner that's the dark square. So if black refuses to do that and plays like king to b8, then we can use one move to wait and reposition our knight, knight to c4. The idea is that if he plays the move king to a8, we can use our knight to force him out of the corner, eventually with the move knight to b6. So here, we can have a little bit of shift in our focus. We can actually prevent him from going to this side, but instead force him towards this corner. So what we need to do is play bishop to f4, so that later on we can play the move knight to b6 and force him towards this way. So if black plays king to a7, we just go knight b6 and control this square now. So now obviously black can't go back into that corner, so he needs to play the move king to a6. After king to a6, we want to keep forcing him towards this side, so we don't want him to have the opportunity to go back to a7, so we've got to play our move bishop to b8. After bishop to b8, we guard the a7 square, the king guards the b7 square and the c7 square, so he is forced to play the move king to a5, getting closer to that corner over there. So if he plays the move king to a5, we don't want him to be able to come out here. We want him to keep him pinned against the a file, so we need to play our move knight to d5 to control this square. Remember that he can't go king a6, because if he plays the move king to a6, then we have knight to b4, and after king to a5, we just play king to c5, even more forcing him towards this side, controlling the a6 square. So instead of playing king to a6, black here might try something like king to a4 to get himself closer towards the a1 square, but to get himself away from the restriction of the knight. So here, once again, we need to follow his king with our king, and we need to play the move king to c5. So after king to c5, we do indeed give him all these square to use. However, the king going to c5 is once again pushing the black's king closer towards the a1 square. So now if he plays the move, for example, king to a5, then we can also go knight b4. Once again, it's like the one before. We control a6, and now he can't go there. So seeing that he's going to be cut off anyway if he plays king to a5, black might want to just play king to b3 instead. So after king to b3, we play knight b4 anyway. So what's the point of knight b4? Well, after knight b4, once again, we are cutting his path off from this side. And after knight b4, if black plays the move king to, let's say, b2, now we can use our bishop again and use the bishop to help further control where the king can go. So here, we notice that the knight is controlling the c2 square, and the bishop is now going to come to f4 and control the c1 square. So essentially, we have these two squares controlled, only c3 is open. So the question, of course, is what if he goes to c3? He wants to get out, right? Well, key thing is that actually, after c3, we notice that the knight controls this square, the knight controls this square, the king has controlled the c4 and d4 squares, and the bishop is controlling the d2 square. So even though the king can go to c3, he's actually still blocked in by all of white's pieces. We simply just need to play a waiting move here, bishop to g5. And now once he plays king to b3, we can play bishop to f6 now, blocking off these two squares now. The king controls c4, and once again, king a4 is not going to work. So now, this time, black will play the move king to a3. After king to a3, it gives white a chance to play the move king to c4. If black tries the move king to a4, then white can play bishop d8 this time, guarding the a5 square, and ensuring that the king is now stuck fully from the 4th rank and below. The king's only move is king a3, and now we repeat the process with our knight again. So we need to move our knight to d3 here, the idea being that you eventually want to put it on b2 to control a4 later on. So of course black can play the move king to a4 again, but this time we can put our knight on b2, controlling a4 and forcing him to a3. After this, we need to protect our knight here with our king, king to c3, and now black is once again forced to play the move king to a2. After king to a2, we want to control this square now, right? We want to force black closer to the corner, so we don't want to give him the a3 square. Therefore, bishop to e7 is the best move. And now he is forced to choose between b1 and a1. If white doesn't want to go in the corner immediately, he can play the move king to b1. And now he is threatening to escape with king to c1. So of course white needs to stop that as soon as possible and play the move knight to d3. Now if black plays the move king to a2 again, then we need to find some way to force his king in the corner. The king controls the b3 square, and the bishop controls the a3 square. So really, the black's only choices are these three squares here to move with. So we want to cut off one of them by playing the move king to c2. Okay, so we've cut off the a2 square. These three squares are cut off by the king. This square is cut off by the bishop. So the knight's really free right now, and the king, black king, is only confined to the a2 and a1. So we can see how this might play out. Eventually, we're going to have to use our knight to give check on the when the king's on a2, maybe like knight to c1. And when that happens, we can later on force black's king to a1, where then we can give checkmate with our bishop on f6. So how this might play out? So let's say he plays the move king to a1. We can't play knight to c1 just yet because that's stalemate, and that would be a huge mistake after coming this far. So instead, we should just play a waiting move with our bishop, like bishop to d6, while we still control a3. So this time, the idea is that we force black to put his king onto a2, where our check can begin. So knight to c1 check, and now the king is forced to go to a1, and then we have bishop to e5 checkmate. We have successfully completed the checkmate with a bishop and a knight.